Maybe a little. So if anybody knows me, you know that I am a type A. So it actually has been a small amount of panic for me that I could not figure out exactly what I wanted to speak on today. I was never able to get a title together, and it didn't even occur to me because I have been so incredibly slammed with everything outside of life until Friday was I was driving home from work that today was Easter. Um, so I felt a little bit of pressure to try to figure out what it was I wanted to speak on. Um, and what it ultimately came down to was I wasn't even able to come up with a structure until I was in the shower this morning. So I don't have notes. Bear with me, but I'm going to try to talk to you all today about something that's very important to me, which is kind of the lessons that I learned, because I felt like Easter could drive that home more than anything else. So at my core, I am a humanist. Growth is my passion and love is my religion. Now, I know that some of you probably internally cringed when I said love is my religion. But don't worry, I am not going to drag us into the Christmas season. There is not going to be an overly ambitious man in a suit who cares more about business than he does about me. There will not be a swarthy lumberjack with a heart of gold that comes in flannel. We're not going into a Hallmark movie. We are, however, going to talk about love as a teacher and love as growth. As I was growing up, I would watch these different movies, right? The escapism, the thing that you want to learn about. So I watched things like The Bridges of Madison County when I was far too young. I watched When Harry Met Sally. I watched so many movies that I couldn't conceptually understand everything that was happening because I was at such a young age. I hadn't had those experiences that allowed me to fully appreciate what those movies and what that media was trying to convey about love, about life, about the lessons that you learned. But there were movies that I ended up loving in a really weird way, which is very strange considering I watched Bridges of Madison County at 8 years old. It's again very inappropriate. But you go through life and you see those things. So when I watched When Harry Met Sally when I was 12 years old, the diner scene did not typically resonate with me. I didn't understand why we all wanted to have what she was having. I didn't understand the sound she was making. It wasn't until I was in my early 20s when I went back and watched that scene later that I definitely wanted to have that. I never understood what it was to have a love so bittersweet as when I watched Bridges of Madison County. I never understood the scene where she's in the truck with her husband at the red light, where she had to choose between what was the love of her life and her family. I couldn't understand why she chose to stay in the truck until later when I had to choose between my family and what I thought was a great love. And I say all of this not to try to give you heartache, not to try to tell you that love is sad or it's inherently something that always makes you have a bittersweet memory. I say that so that you can understand that I think deep down we generalize love. We generalize loss, we generalize grief, and we don't necessarily always understand what an amazing teacher that it can be if we embrace that. So forgive me as I might ramble as I go through this, but one of the most important lessons that I was able to learn, and one of the things that I think ties in today more than any other day, is that grief is the price that we pay for love. It's one of the hardest lessons that we learn, and it's one of the things that is the most difficult part of the human experience. I was 15 years old when I watched The Passion of Christ. I had two different settings because of the abusive environment that I grew up in. I either felt nothing or I felt everything far too much. I knew logically from all of the stories that I was told as I was growing up, Jesus was put on a cross. He had nails put into his hands. It took hours for him to die because he suffocated trying to hold himself up on the cross. I knew that. That had been told to me so many times. But seeing that movie, watching him carry a cross, watching him be put on a cross, watching him be scourged, have his flesh torn off in ribbons, watching that was an entirely different experience. But what I didn't understand is I'm crying and I'm sobbing in this movie theater, what it was like for Mary. There's a scene in the movie, if you've watched it, and it is, to me, now at a point in my life where I'm at, one of the most devastating and heartbreaking things that I have ever witnessed. As she's watching her son carry the cross, he falls and he skins his knee. And what you see on Mary is this unadulterated grief. And she flashes back to memories of him as a little boy. And if you really sit there and you think about everything that she's going through as a mother, her love is sitting there and being there with her son as he goes through the last moments at the end of his life. And what she sees is not the pain so much because she's there to support him. She sees the love that she gave him. She sees him falling and skinning his knee as a little boy. And as you watch throughout the movie, she never leaves. She doesn't turn away because it's too much, because she's there to support her child. And while I'm not capable of having children that I could birth myself, I didn't truly understand what it was in that moment to truly pay price for love that is grief. I didn't understand that teachable moment. But there was a night, and it was June 14th of 2024, and my cat had been sick, but I had convinced myself that she was going to be fine. She'd been sick before. She'd been tired before. So I went out with some friends. I went on a trip, and I was coming back, and I remembered the snow. I remember it being so dark, and as we're driving up the mountain from Chattanooga, everything was black and white. And I remember sitting in that dichotomy because all you could see was this vortex of snow. And I knew that that was a moment that I would never forget. I knew that it was a moment that I would remember for the rest of my life, but what I didn't know was why. The next morning was January 15th. I'm working from home. There's snow, there's ice. I watched at 7 a.m. that morning as an ambulance tried to come to the assisted living place across the street. And it was so bad that they slid off into the ditch. There was no getting out of my home in that moment. And at 9:36 a.m., I noticed my fat little whale of a cat. My baby was starting to act weirdly. She was starting to act strangely. And she shuddered and she made a sound I'd never heard before. And I remembered yelling for my sister. And she started to shake. And she started to struggle to breathe. And I'm panicking, and my sister cups her hands over her face. She's trying with everything in her to give her mouth to mouth because, this is still my daughter. This is still my cat, but this is someone she's also grown to love. The way that I got River was that she was thrown out of a moving vehicle on a highway, Hickson, and she came up to some friends of mine. She still had so much love in her that she walked straight up to two people she'd never seen, and she asked for ice cream. She had broken ribs, she had mites in her ears, she had mange, but still she was capable of love. Now, one was a college student. She was the one that tried to take her, and they were going to throw her out of the dorm. The only place they could take her to was a kill shelter, and so she came to me. At the time, I was in a horrifically abusive relationship to the point where it's not that I was actively suicidal, but I didn't want to wake up. I just kept thinking that over and over again of the toxicity with my bio family. I knew I couldn't go home. And it was still somehow better to stay there in all of that. But it was her who kept me going, because without me, she didn't have water, she didn't have food, she didn't have a clean little sandbox for when she needed to go. And I made it through my days because I was there for my daughter. We got out of that situation, we gave her a good life, we had a better life. And it was all of these things that were flashing back to me, her little paw on my face when I was crying, her crawling into bed with me. And I'm watching this and I'm seeing it because you don't understand what it's like to be Mary in that situation, watching your son carry a cross. You don't understand how heartbreaking it is to not be able to do anything to stop it. And I remember realizing in that moment that she wasn't going to make it. And I remember taking her in my arms and watching as she took her last breath. I didn't give birth to her, but she was my daughter as much as anyone or anything ever could be. I remember holding her and screaming and just saying that I was sorry, because I wanted to fix it and I wanted to make it better, and I would have given anything in the world to trade places with her. And all I could think about when I had some sort of rational thought in my head was that scene from the movie. Mary sitting there watching her child carry a cross and falling down and skinning his knee. Grief is the price that I paid for love. And it is a price that I would pay over and time again, because loving her was one of the best things that I ever did in my life. So going back and watching that movie, because I have so much religious trauma, was difficult for me. But it was cathartic, because in that moment, while watching that movie, about 3 months after she passed, was the one moment that I understood Mary, and I understood that scene. As we go through life, these things happen. And on a brighter note and a happier note, as you watch things, like when Harry met Sally and you realize that love doesn't have to be all consuming. It can be the person that gets on your last nerve that you want to flick in the back of the ear, but who at the end of the day understands you better than anyone else ever has. It can be understanding that there can be love and that it can't be enough, and that, as happens in the Bridges of Madison County, you have to choose your family over yourself, and a love that is heartbreaking. So when I say that at my core, I am a humanist, and when I say that growth is my passion, and when I say that love is my religion, I say that because love is the teacher, whether it is the hardest lesson, the softest lesson of learning to love myself, of learning to accept that it's okay that I didn't grow up in an environment where I had parents who loved me, but that I found parents who later on could tell me they were proud of me and understand the unconditional love they gave me. And I can pass that on, because at my core, I'm a humanist, and I can give those lessons back when I see people hurting. And I can continue to go through this world in a space where, even if love hurts, even if being human means that at the end of the day, there can be more sorrow than there is love and light to give. We are here for each other, to help each other grow, to change in those experiences and in those moments and find the beauty in the pain. And I think nothing symbolizes that quite as much for me and gives me the words to move through these difficult times that we find ourselves in, with people who have this hatred, people who don't see the love and the light in others around us, so that we can grow, we can help them grow, and we can find love in the darkest parts of life and ourselves. Thank you.